Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Should Dorian Finney-Smith start over Rui Hachimura? And what should Rob Pelinka be looking for on the trade market? And are those answers related? All that next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always going to be free, never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Andy is, and we can now say this officially, without any rounding, over 27,000 subscribers are tuning in and wondering what exactly the Lakers are going to do at the trade deadline. And even before that, because new arguments are percolating around the starting lineup. We will unpack all of these things here in a moment, right after I tell you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, if the NFL playoffs, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Full disclosure, you saw Raj jumped in yesterday. For me, I was on vacation with my family. I did not really see the game in Houston. Caught some clips and highlights, read about it and all that stuff. Think I got the gist of it. I would say, Andy, at least my takeaway before we get to this whole DFS Rui Hachimura thing, I was very encouraged the Lakers came back in the third quarter, because otherwise it would have been abundantly clear the Lakers have a real and potentially unsolvable problem when it comes to the really bouncy athletic teams around the league.
There's a lot that got evened up in the second half of that game against Houston for all the problems that they had in the first half. For example, rebounding and on the offensive glass. Like, I don't know how many second chance points exactly that Houston had off their 11 offensive rebounds in the first half. I just know this piece of the equation. The Lakers had zero. The Lakers had 0 second chance points in the first half. Like, Jalen Green had 18 points in the first quarter, and he's a very inconsistent shooter and scorer, but that type of bouncy player going off like he did in a quarter, particularly once Max Christie was subbed out of the game. 12 of his 18 points came after Christie sat. But like, that type of player going off in the Lakers, all the transition points, all of the fast break opportunities that Houston was getting and the Lakers did not. Like, those are the type of things that bring out the worst fears when it comes to this Lakers. But to your point about the way the third and fourth quarters played out, the Lakers out-rebounded Houston 25-21, basically even on the offensive boards. They held Houston to under 40%, both from the field and from behind the arc, while shooting, I believe, 49% from the field, 52% from behind the arc. In that second half, obviously problems in the last minute or so of the game, and you're always at a disadvantage if you dig yourself that big of a hole to start a second half.
Right.
But what it did show is the Lakers have to really play at the top of their focus and their energy and their intensity if they're going to play with a team like Houston, but they can do it. A lot of it's just a lot of it really is a matter of the willingness to do it. And they talked about it after the game.
Yeah, I think it's the willingness to do it. And the part that sticks out to me is when you talk about attention. It's like, sometimes, look, guys are too quick. You get a little step on you, and that's going to happen. And that's going to happen to the Lakers no matter what they do at the trade deadline. And honestly, no matter what they do in the starting lineup. But it's like, you need to do all the stuff to prevent some of these things from happening. And that means being attentive about putting a body on someone when a shot goes up, really being mindful of who is my guy in this situation, who is a body that I can find to do this, making sure that your shot selection on the offensive side is sound, that you're not making bad passes that force you to play in, turnover, transition defense, and all that kind of stuff. They have strength, the Lakers do. A lot of it is literally strength that helps them against a lot of teams. They are 20-15. They're good, but they are not bulletproof. And I don't think there's a trade out there that changes that necessarily. And there's not a trade out there that's going to make them suddenly able to compete on the same level of athleticism as the Houstons of the Western Conference or the Detroits of the Eastern Conference. But what they can do is lean into their literal strength, lean into some of their experience and their basketball sense to just do the right stuff. And that, I think, mitigates some of these, but they cannot afford any slip at all, because those teams are going to continue to give them problems. It always is funny to me too, Andy, like separating NBA teams into athletic versus not athletic. But I think people understand. And the Western Conference, I don't think, is filled with crazy bouncy teams that the Lakers can't play with. But the teams around the league that are this way give the Lakers problems. And they don't have to be good teams. They just have to be athletic.
It's two recent games that we've seen, whether you're talking about against Houston or Cleveland, where in the case of Jared Allen or Steven Adams, they were given trouble by teams getting offensive rebounds against them, second chance opportunities, and doing well with them. And they're two very different players. Like Jared Allen is much more of a fast, bouncy athlete, whereas Steven Adams just moves guys out of the way. And both of these guys, it should be noted, you have to try to figure out ways to offset the Steven Allens and Jared Allens of the world. But the reality is those guys do that against the entire league. They're a problem for everyone. Like Adams
doesn't have much of a role on this Houston team, but when he plays, that's still what he's good at. And the Lakers, this gets to, and we'll maybe talk about this in a minute, like what the Lakers need. A bigger body behind Anthony Davis might help against Steven Adams. But is that the problem you really need to solve? It's an interesting question.
Yeah. And, Jared Allen, I think some of this was just AD getting pulled away from the basket because somebody was getting beaten off the dribble and nobody rotating over to address Jared Allen at all. Or there was one monster putback, for example, that Steven Adams had, basically racing from in between the top of the key and the arc all the way to the basket. And that wasn't even a matter of Steven Adams being arguably the strongest guy in the league and being able to just move guys at will whenever he wants. That was, nobody paid attention to Steven Adams.
Yeah.
That was a detail problem. That was not a Steven Adams is Thor type problem.
One of the things that sticks out, you talk about Cleveland, and this is really what separates a team that's, I think what Houston has done to get them, up to 23-12, this is a very good team.
Yeah.
That's ascending quickly. I think what they've done is pretty impressive, but there's a difference. Like, they have some flaws that can be exploited and some inconsistencies. Cleveland is really a great example of what you get when you put they got some athletes, and they're also really good as a team. Like the Lakers had trouble with Portland in certain spots, just with the bounciness. The difference is Portland is a terrible basketball team. And so you can beat them with good team play and probably usually beat them pretty easily. Cleveland is the other way around. Like, they can maul you in 100 different ways. This conversation is related, I think, in a lot of the ways that we've been talking about it, to another one of the big issues that came out of that game, which is who really should be starting at that other forward position with LeBron. And is it Rui Hachimura or is it Dorian Finney-Smith? And when you talk about athleticism and attention to detail and stuff like that, and what's the recipe for countering some of those disadvantages the Lakers have, I think you can start to make a pretty clear case for one guy over the other. That was not a subtle setup. We'll get to it next.
What a tease.
I know.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now, new customers, you bet just $5. $5, you can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Visit the website. You can check out the latest betting lines for the Rams, for the Chargers. LA is in the NFL playoffs, baby. Not the Raiders, though. LA's honorary team. They're on the outside looking in. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Perennially on the outside looking in. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Maybe some, Andy, of the mystery of that, of my opinion here, was undone by that tease going from the first to the second segment. Do want to let people know, sign up for the newsletter, the Locked On Lakers newsletter. Get the podcast delivered right to your inbox every day, along with a lot of great analysis around the league. Great way to both keep up with the show, but also with everything that's happening around the NBA in one quick newsletter. Go to lockedondaily.com, click on Locked On Lakers. Rui Hachimura, I think, is a hardworking player. I think he's a team guy. There's a lot to like. He shot the ball beyond certainly my expectations when he got here. I was very suspicious as to whether or not, playoff Rui was going to be sustainable. It has been, and more in terms of his outside shooting. Brings a lot to the table. His flaws are, I think, at this point, pretty well baked in. He is not a good rebounder for his size, not consistently enough, and he is not a good defender. And I think, for me at least, he's not a good defender in part because of because of this attention to detail thing. The instincts aren't great there. And you can say the exact opposite about Dorian Finney-Smith on that side of the ball, where the instincts are excellent. And I think that, to me, is the biggest reason that it would make sense to flip-flop those guys. Because if you are going to be giving 30-something minutes to one of those dudes, and you need somebody to help inoculate you against the Houstons of the world, Finney-Smith's going to be better at it than Rui, I think.
I agree with you. And it's interesting. I also think one of the reasons that moving Rui to the bench could be beneficial for both the team and Rui is, first of all, I think it could give him more opportunities to play at his natural position, which would be the 4. He's playing more as a 3, certainly defensively with this team. And
that's fair. Yeah.
That does not play to Rui's strengths as a defender at all. And while Dorian Finney-Smith, we've talked about this before, DFS, I think, has been trending more in terms of most effectiveness guarding bigger wings or 4s, maybe even sometimes as an undersized 5. He is more capable of being an effective wing defender than Rui is. He's a better defender, period, and he's a more versatile defender, period. I also, it was interesting when JJ pulled Rui less than a minute into the third quarter, put DFS back in. He said he wanted to give Rui a mental break. It was nothing Rui did wrong. He thought Rui responded well when he came back in the game. I actually thought Rui played fine in the second half. And the first half, at least offensively, Rui played well. He scored 10 points. But there is an energy and an edge and a synergy that gets created defensively with DFS being out there to complement Max, to complement AD, while he still has not the scoring upside and total ways he can score like Rui. His offensive role is clean and makes sense. He is a shooter that you have to respect. He can make those shots. He serves a purpose spacing the floor. And then off the bench for Rui, I think he actually provides something that bench unit needs pretty badly. And we've seen it all year, which is a primary scoring hub. And the closest they've had to it all season was DAngelo Russell, and he was very inconsistent in that role. He thrived more as a facilitator than a scorer, but Rui is more of a scorer than DFS. He's a better, more established scorer than Dalton Connect at this stage of his career. He's a better, more established scorer than Gabe Vincent when he eventually returns. And there, I think, is going to be more of just a lane for Rui to occupy and a need to fill. Like you can argue that both units, DFS and Rui, make more sense for the opposite place they're starting games.
I think, and that's the other half of it that I was going to go to. Like, and this weaves into this broader conversation of what the Lakers need to be doing. Part of, I mean, in terms around the trade deadline and stuff like that, what kinds of players, who should they go get? What kind of players should they go get? And what is worth giving up to get that guy? One of the things you have to do, though, to really make that work and really make this difficult calculus the Lakers have of not a lot to offer, but kind of need some stuff, or maybe you want to make the big splashy move and quote unquote go all in or whatever. The first thing you have to do is allocate your own resources in the best way possible. And one of the things that I liked about the Russell move, as big of a fan as I was of D'Lo, and even how he was playing when he wasn't playing, when the shot was off, his impact was positive and all that kind of stuff. It still made sense to send him to the bench for this group this year, both because Reeves and Russell were really struggling to defend together, but also it was making Reeves a worse player because his defensive responsibilities, which he was kind of failing at, were also undermining his offensive responsibilities, which needed to be better. I wouldn't say he was failing at those, but they could have been better, as we've seen. There's a little bit of something like that here. Like, you're right. Like, the Lakers got a little bench scoring out of D'Lo, and it didn't totally work out. It wasn't totally natural, but there were games when you could tell the difference that D'Lo was there to give you 16 points that you weren't otherwise going to get. This is basically the same thing. It's not that Russell was necessarily doing lots of things wrong. He kind of wasn't. His shot would have come around. It just didn't fit right. Rui's not necessarily doing everything. He's doing what you would expect Rui Hachimura to do at a pretty decent level, I think. It just doesn't fit quite as well, especially now that you've tweaked the roster and have different personnel.
Also, too, like, if this move is coming, and it feels like it is, I mean, Dorian's time keeps increasing. JJ is clearly comfortable with him. You can tell his teammates are comfortable with him. You can tell that they really respect.
I think he's one of those guys that's pretty easy to play with.
I actually, for my show Lakers Talk on ESPN LA 710 Monday nights, I had Adam Armbrecht on from Locked On Nets, and to get more of a scouting report on DFS, I'll tweet out some links and stuff like that. Maybe try to put them in the show notes. But I think our listeners here would definitely enjoy Adam's thoughts on DFS just from covering him for a couple of years. But he mentioned that he's a guy that teammates love immediately, and he just picks up things very, very quickly. But this move feels increasingly like it's coming, and Rui is playing, ever since DFS arrived, like a guy that feels like it's coming. And if that's the case, I think it is better for all involved to just rip the Band-Aid. And Rui, I'm sure, is not going to like it. But the only thing worse than receiving bad news is when you're dreading bad news, and when it feels like bad news is coming and you have to think about it. This brings closure to the situation. Rui is still going to get a lot of minutes, if for no other reason than he's a top 6 player on this team. And you can't have, unless you're Tibbs, you can't have 5 guys playing like 45 minutes a night. Like, Rui is still going to have a very important role on this team because they need him to have one. But I feel like, again, it makes more sense. Like, both guys are a bit miscast in their roles right now. I just feel like right now, especially once DFS arrived, it's very similar to when we thought Vando playing this season was a thing. I had lobbied for Vando to actually start and Rui to come off the bench for a lot of the same reasons that I feel like DFS makes more sense starting and Rui coming off the bench. It's the same basic concept.
It's asset maximization for what you got. You have a certain amount of skill sets. You got to plug them into the right places. And I don't think of Rui Hachimura as the type of guy who's going to undermine a locker room. But I mean, look, say what you want about Russell. And did he play well off the bench? Was he always consistent? No, like sometimes the D'Lo bench experience had its shortcomings. Like, he needs time to be able to do stuff and whatever. And he's, the goofy decisions seem more amplified when he's playing 18 minutes a night or 22, all that stuff. But by all accounts, as far as I could tell, he took the job, the situation professionally. He handled it well.
Yes.
He wasn't grumbling. He wasn't making himself, the main character in the story here. You said that like Rui probably wouldn't like it. He absolutely wouldn't like it, but he would do it. And that's the thing. It's like, you don't want players to like the idea unless they're like 38 years old and really need to be like, they're like, I shouldn't be here. Like, you don't want a guy in his prime who just signed a big contract hoping to be a starter finally, like on a good team in this league, to take a demotion like that. Well, and even if you don't want to call it a demotion, any NBA player who goes from starting to coming off the bench reads that as a demotion. They just do. That is how these guys are wired. And you wouldn't want him to like it, but he'll do it. And he'll do it, and he'll be professional about it. And if it helps the team win, then he will be fine. It'll be fine. He'll be exactly what you want, which is a guy who wishes he was starting, but is going to get out there and do what he can to help the team. There was one other thing here that you mentioned that I think is critical for thinking about how the Lakers go forward with the deadline. Something we're going to get into, I think, a lot over the next couple of weeks at the least. Start to break that down next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by PrizePicks. Basketball season's heating up. There's no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than PrizePicks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just love a little friendly competition, PrizePicks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. Pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. Let's say you think in a game LeBron is going to drop more than 30 points, or maybe Luka, Luka's hurt right now, but when he comes back, that he'll get less than 8 assists in a game. PrizePicks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. And with PrizePicks flex play option, even if one of the picks doesn't hit, still double your money. Plus, when you hit, you can get your money fast, sometimes as quick as 15 minutes. Keep any game exciting with PrizePicks. Now is the perfect time to join. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. There's no need to even win to get that bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game.
There is, I think, one other really good reason, Andy, to do the thing. We should mention, you talked about Jared Vanderbilt. We do actually have some Jared Vanderbilt health news. As always, it comes with a disclaimer. Believe it when you see it. And nobody's entirely sure what this means. But JJ Redick has said that there is meaningful progress with Jared Vanderbilt's return to play protocol. And he's getting closer. I mean, not entirely sure what any of these things mean, but they seemed pretty jazzed on the whole thing.
Also, too, for those unaware, tonight's game in Dallas, it's not just Luka that's going to be unavailable. Kyrie Irving is going to be unavailable as well. He's going to be out 1 to 2 weeks with a back issue, which turns a game that the Lakers really needed to win on the heels of the Houston loss to one that, like, no, seriously, no BS. Win this damn game.
Yeah, go win the game. And this,
really
Dallas is a half game behind the Lakers, and the Nuggets are a game ahead. Like, everybody's got their bumps and bruises and stuff like that. The Thunder clearly at the top of the conference. The Rockets and Grizzlies, I think, are kind of separating themselves from everyone else as like the next two, just in the standings. So I'm not talking about playoff matchups and whatever. But everyone else in there, like the Nuggets got problems. The Mavericks have problems. The Clippers have problems. The Lakers have problems. But like the Lakers can pretty firmly get themselves into that 4-5 area with the, by finishing this home heavy stretch in January with a good record and then doing things like beating a wounded Dallas team in Dallas tonight. It can go a long way.
Yeah, it's really important. Keeping in the theme with what we had talked about before, put a body on Derek Lively.
It says what he is on the back of his jersey.
Yes, but keep an eye on Derek Lively. He's the guy that you need to watch for when it comes to the offensive rebounds. He averages 3 per game. There's your friendly neighborhood scouting report. All right.
So you talk about
Daniel Gafford too, as well. Another guy. Just watch those dudes.
If you see a tall center on the Mavericks, put a body on him.
But the good news, though, is the 4th leading offensive rebounder per game on average for Dallas is actually Kyrie Irving. So he's
there.
out.
You go. One of the things that I think you said that is totally relevant to this is like we mentioned Jared Vanderbilt here at the top of the segment. The Lakers believe he's going to come back. There is a quote in that story from Dan Wakey at the LA Times when he's talking to other scouts and stuff that, the idea that the Lakers really do want to see what it looks like when Vanderbilt is back to try to assess the needs. I sort of understand this in terms of like what I was talking about before about asset management. But the flip side is, and the reason if you're going to make a change, it makes sense to do it before Vanderbilt gets back. So you're not changing like 5 things at once. If you do it now, you can play with the rotation for however many games that is before Vando comes back, before Christian Wood is back, before you have these other players. And you're not trying to analyze like one more data point in that, like, wait, did that change because Vanderbilt came back, because we switched starting lineups, because Wood is back? Where do it now? You know what the team looks like for 4 or 5 games with this new starting lineup. And then when you reintroduce another player, you have a better idea of what the baseline was to decide what kind of player we need next. Because I thought you and Raj had a really, started an interesting conversation, and it continued into the comment section and all that. And certainly Lakers Twitter is live with this one. It's like, what do the Lakers go out and get? There was a huge clamoring in the first half, especially. Go get another big. Why don't we have Jonas Valanciunas yet? Oh, whatever, so on and so on and so on. But the Lakers have to be really careful. Like, are they trading for position or are they trading for skill set? Which is the better approach?
Well, it's interesting. Like when we were talking about this rebounding issue that the Lakers had against either Houston or Cleveland, it got me thinking about, remember in the series in 2023, the first round against Memphis, where the Lakers, whenever the second unit was out there, they were getting killed on the boards. And I was getting really frustrated because I was like, just put Wenyen Gabriel into this game. Like if you put Wenyen into this game, who, Wenyen is, he's not the most skilled player in the world, but he is a very good rebounder for his size. He's a particularly good offensive rebounder for his size. The Lakers with LeBron and Rui out there, they just need one more guy who is 6'8" or taller. Just put him out there and it will solve the rebounding issues. And finally, Darvin put Wenyen back in the rotation, and it did just that. And obviously, a guy like Wenyen won't automatically solve rebounding issues against all teams, or, depending on the size of the players you're talking about. And Memphis was missing a couple of their big guys. But what made me think about this was just the idea of, I don't know if the Lakers need necessarily another big man, depending on what the big would cost, but they do need better rebounders. If you can find better rebounders, credible rebounders at different positions, that is going to at least solve this to some degree. Like, they are missing right now a skill set in rebounding more, I think, than necessarily size. If you can find it in both and the price is right, great. But the Lakers are only going to have so many opportunities to solve more than a handful of issues through the trade market. And as you also have to think about, like, is whoever you're going after worth the price? How does it fit? Like, the Walker Kessler question, assuming he really is available. And side note, I do not understand.
Yeah.
For the life of me, I don't understand why, if Utah is dead set on a rebuild, a 23-year-old double-double true center who's a great rim protector.
Right. The defensive metrics on Kessler, if you buy defensive metrics at all, are insane.
If he really is available, I almost feel like it's a red flag, or either that or Utah's front office like wants to do something super specific that for whatever reason doesn't involve Kessler. But the idea that you can't rebuild with him at 23 makes no sense. The idea of, well, we don't want to pay him, just pay him. Like, what are you saving your money for? The free agents that never come? Like, you have to pay somebody. If you give Kessler $25 million a year, it's not like he won't be tradable.
No, and
I just don't get it.
It maybe costs more than, I don't know, but to me, this is, if you can get Walker Kessler, okay, great. Like I buy that. Like, I was a little more suspicious. People who are smarter than me really break down the numbers well, have shown what Kessler's impact is, even if he's not a perfect fit around AD, the trickle effect, whatever it might be. Like, he's really good at some important stuff, and you can kind of figure it out. And, having that high level player on that side of the ball has tremendous value and can make, I think, could lengthen Anthony Davis's career, even if it just means playing 25 minutes a night with a guy or 20 minutes a night with a guy who can lighten his burden like that, can be really meaningful for Davis. But after somebody like him, Jonas Valanciunas is a name that we hear constantly. And I know you've said many times you don't like it. And I think, I agree with you, but I think sometimes people are missing the kind of the forest for the trees here. Like, if you could get Valanciunas for Gabe Vincent and a second rounder, I think they have a couple left that they can do. I forget, but or something really minor. Okay, fine. But if you have to start giving up real value in whether in your current rotation or in your draft capital, even a heavily protected first round pick, you got to be real careful with that, because what is Valanciunas? Is Valanciunas going to solve your athleticism problem? He's certainly not. He might help you with the Steven Adamses of the world, but he also,
if you don't play Houston in the playoffs, I don't know how much Valanciunas is going to help you at all. If you don't play Denver in the playoffs, I don't know how much he's going to help you at all.
But honestly, even if you do, I'm not sure how much he's going to help you, because I don't know how much he would end up playing. And I don't think
he's going to play much at all.
Because if you play, or let me say this, are you comfortable if you get Jonas Valanciunas? What's the downstream effect of trying to figure out, okay, we've got Valanciunas. He's a player who historically has played between 20 and 30 minutes a night because he's a good player. I'm not trying. You've called him overqualified for this, but let's just say he does. Let's just say he doesn't. Okay, so now your main lineup is LeBron now at the 3, with AD at the 4, Valanciunas at the 5. Valanciunas is not a good defender. He's not going to protect the rim in the slightest. It doesn't make Anthony Davis's life any easier. He does help with the rebounding a little bit. He's a good rebounder. But now who isn't playing? Where does Dorian Finney-Smith fit in? Where does Christie fit in?
Rui
with a lot of stuff. Where does Rui fit in? Where does, how do you get some of these other guys? Where does Vanderbilt fit in if he plays?
Who's running your second unit if Gabe Vincent isn't there anymore?
Right. And if Rui is not there, who's scoring? It's I'm not saying that these guys are untradeable or can't, whatever, but is your defense with Jonas Valanciunas there easier to attack or harder to attack than one that features Dorian Finney-Smith more? I think it's easier. He's bigger, but he's a much lesser defender. And so, if it costs you very little, great, whatever. But if you have to start giving up real assets to do it, then you got a problem, because even if you make the protections on a pick, it's not going to go there, whatever, you still lose control of that pick. You can't promise it to Washington and say it's 1 through 20 protected for 2 more years and then trade it to someone else. You've lost control of that pick. So I just think they have to be careful and really trade for the skill sets that they need, not just the positions that they think they need.
Finally, real quick, we'll get more into it over the course of the week, but I just wanted to address, because there had been the report that Bradley Beal would be willing to lift his no trade clause for a handful of teams that include the Lakers. It's not going to happen.
No.
Like, for a bunch of reasons. I'm not saying that Beal wouldn't lift it. I'm saying he's not going to be a Laker for a variety of reasons that makes absolutely no sense.
Yet, if the Lakers trade for Bradley Beal, I'm not even getting into how the finances would work, or whatever, unless it comes back with
means they gut their whole team. Just so you know, they have to gut like a good chunk of their team.
I would say, like, if it came with massive draft compensation to take on Beal's contract, maybe you consider it. The Suns don't have any draft compensation, so that's not something that can go. If it is torches and pitchforks, legitimately,
it means you've learned nothing from the Russ,
and it's never going to happen.
Nothing.
And if Bradley Beal is kind enough to waive his no trade clause for the Lakers, I think the Lakers politely say thank you and kind of wave it back. Just wave it right back there.
Yep.
It's not going to happen anyway. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 27,000 subscribers to the program. Make sure to check out the postcast with Dave Palais and also the Locked On Lakers newsletter. Go to lockedonlakers.com. Click on that subscribe button for Locked On Lakers, and all of this goodness is delivered to you every day. We'll be back, of course, after tonight's game, hopefully celebrating a road win for the Lakers in Dallas. See everyone later tonight on YouTube, tomorrow on audio.